From KAMR Local 4 News, your local election headquarters, this is Politics Today.
The 89th Texas Legislature begins on Tuesday and runs until June. We'll tell you more about what you can expect lawmakers to focus on. Also, one of the most tenured Texas lawmakers is working with the newest and youngest Texas representative for our area, Caroline Fairley. We'll hear what both of them are focused on as they head into Tuesday. The 89th Texas Legislature begins on Tuesday, and we're taking the time to speak to our local representatives. Texas lawmakers have several top priorities they hope to accomplish this session in education, agriculture, and energy. Governor Greg Abbott has said that school choice in particular is one of the top of his list. Our area in Amarillo will be represented by one of the most tenured lawmakers who is also teaming up with a new face in the 87th district. Texas Representative John Smithee was in Amarillo Monday night to speak about the upcoming session as he gets ready for his 40th year in the Texas House. Politics Today's Devin Singleton caught up with him to see what his focus was going into Tuesday. He told us that before any work can be done, they've got one big issue to resolve first.
Well, you know, we convene next Tuesday, the 14th, which is a late time to convene. On the way it works, that's about as late as we can go in. And so the first thing we do on the first day is select a speaker in the House. And of course, this time that's very much up in the air who the new speaker is going to be. So it really puts us behind when we have to select the speaker on opening day. Now, it may resolve between now and opening day, but it may not. So that's the first thing we do, and I think that's kind of stolen everybody's attention for right now. But once we get a speaker chosen, then we adopt House rules for the session, and it'll probably be several weeks. We have to get committees assigned, and it'll be several weeks before we actually begin voting on bills.
So I know one of the big ones that especially is Governor Greg Abbott's priority will be the school choice proposals and stuff like that. And a lot of the concerns were, especially in our area in the school districts. What are your thoughts about the ideas kind of being proposed now that some of that debate has been had and it's looking like Governor Abbott has it?
Well, I think in light of the elections that occurred, the votes are there to pass some sort of school choice bill. And I think, you know, the devil is going to be in the details, as it often is. And for those of us who, like me and the others in the Panhandle, who represent a lot of urban school districts, rural school districts, most of my districts are rural. We've got to protect the rural districts. They're really hurting right now. They're hurting financially, and in other ways, they're having a hard time finding and attracting good teachers. And so we're going to have to make sure that we protect our rural school districts. And I think that's essential to any debate on school choice.
And then kind of maybe outside of just that school choice realm, I know a lot of the big things we're dealing with related to schools are kind of funding. Is there any plans for maybe more school funding? And kind of AISD, they recently had to consolidate some of their schools.
Well, you know, we had money set aside last session to significantly increase funding for schools, and that money got caught up in the school choice fight, and so it never got sent out. And so that money's still there. It hadn't been spent. And then we've got a surplus this session. So we've got the funds available to make some meaningful increases in public education, which we should. I think one of the big things we'd like to do is increase salaries of not only teachers but school employees, because, you know, inflation has been a big factor over the last 2 to 3 years. And our school districts are having a hard time both attracting and retaining good qualified teachers. And so I think that's one area we really need to focus on, is trying to upgrade the status of our teachers and keep the good teachers that we have.
And then kind of with Price out and then Caroline Fairley coming in to fill in his place. What are your thoughts with what would you like to say to her and her team coming in? Have you gotten to speak to them or anything like that?
Oh, yeah, I talk to Caroline on almost a daily basis. We're working together on a lot of things. It's essential, you know, for representing our area that we have a good communication between us. And I will say she is going to be one of the most prepared incoming members that I've ever seen in the legislature. She has really worked hard in making herself prepared to take the job that she's been elected to. And so she'll do great. Now, we'll miss Four Price. I mean, Four was really a remarkable representative for this area, did a lot of great things, and I'll miss him personally. And also, I think the area will miss him as a legislator. But Caroline will be fine. She's going to do a great job. And I think, she's really excited about getting to do good things for the Texas Panhandle.
As you heard from Representative Smithy, he's been working closely with one of the youngest and newest members of the Texas House, Caroline Fairley.
There are several priorities when you look at District 87: education, agriculture, water, rural health care.
Coming up next, we have another exclusive interview with her as she prepares to take over as the representative for Texas's 87th district. Welcome back. One of the biggest changes coming from November is that State Representative Four Price did not run for re-election. Texas voters chose Caroline Fairley to take over Price's long-held seat. She will be the youngest female Republican House member in the Texas state history. I had the chance to sit down with her earlier this week to talk about her focus and preparations as she takes over Texas District 87. So the upcoming legislative session is just around the corner, and as you head to Austin, what are some of your priorities that you have?
Well, thanks so much for having me here today. There are several priorities when you look at District 87: education, agriculture, water, rural health care. Those are, in a nutshell, a few of the policies that are most important.
And for you, and just listening to your constituents and kind of what the concerns are back at home, what are some of the top priorities that you think your constituents want you to focus on?
Totally. Well, so since I announced running for office, I've spent the last year and a half getting to know the constituents here in District 87. And so I've spent a lot of time, whether it's your farmers and ranchers, agriculture, school teachers, and a lot of different folks in the area. And kind of going back to what I just said, but public education is really important, making sure we have funding for our public educators and supporting our rural schools. Agriculture, protecting private property rights. Water is a really big one. Like, where are we going to be in the next 50 years when it comes to the water crisis and finding solutions for that? And then rural health care. Again, something that having access to good, affordable health care in these rural areas.
School choice is obviously going to be something that is at the top of the mind and top of the agenda for a lot of people. And so I guess, where do you stand on school choice?
Well, first off, I am a proponent for parent empowerment, and I do believe a school choice or voucher bill will pass. Right now, I think in the pre-filing, we have over 50 bills filed in some realm that regards school choice, and I think we'll see a lot more. So when we look at school choice in this next session, I do believe it will pass. I believe Governor Abbott has the votes he needs to get this passed, and I really think what the solution to this topic, whether you're for it or against it, is what does the actual legislation do, and how does it impact the rural area, how does it impact Amarillo, and how does it impact the rest of Texas? And so right now, my focus is seeing where that final bill is at and having an open line of communication with my school board members, ISDs, to make sure, do we need to bring amendments to make sure that we do protect these rural schools, because it is really important, and education in Texas is very important. I mean, 90% of kids in Texas are educated through public school, and so we've got to make sure that when it comes down to the legislation that it is effective, and I feel very confident that we will get to a place that feels good with District 87 and also with the rest of Texas, and thankful that Representative King up in Canadian and Representative Smithy that splits Amarillo. I'm really thankful to go into a session with two senior members of the Texas House who know about public education, have been in the district, and understand the needs, and they're going to be a huge asset and helpful to lean on.
And so when it comes to public education here in a rural part of the state, are there any other kind of areas of focus that you think will be important to help your constituents here?
Totally. Well, there's a lot within public education. Safety is a really big one, making sure that when we send our kids to school, parents feel like their kids will be safe. The other thing is these regulations for teachers. A lot of teachers feel like we can't just teach. We have all these red tape we have to go through, and so we're looking at legislation that takes away some of those regulation and brings back more local control to the school districts.
In terms of wildfire prevention, I think last year, I can't believe it's already been a year since a lot of those wildfires broke out, but just kind of looking ahead to the future, trying to make sure that something like that doesn't happen or that the resources are here in case something like that does. What is your focus when it comes to wildfire mitigation?
Well, Maya, I'm glad you brought this up because I remember when the wildfires hit, it was a week or two before the primary in March. And I remember I'd made a lot of phone calls to several people that I thought were impacted, and I was blown away at how resilient these rural areas and the people in the West Texas Panhandle are, and how willing they were to help each other's neighbors. And it was encouraging to see. It was devastating, but it was also encouraging to see how much the community was coming together to say, yeah, we're gonna do what we can to help each other out in these devastating times. And so, in regards to policy, I went to the wildfire briefing in Pampa a few months ago. Chairman Ken King was there, and he's talked a lot about prevention, certain bills that help prevent, because we seem to be on a cycle with these wildfires coming every few years. And the other part is owning an aircraft in Texas. I know that was a really big issue, and so right now I think there are negotiations figuring out, are we going to own our own aircraft? Are we going to have a contract where we lease it, whatever that looks like? And so I'm excited to work with Chairman King on what those bills look like. He's really spearheading it and making sure that we're prepared the next time a wildfire comes.
And speaking of this area and kind of things that impacted, agriculture is big here. And so one of the things that you need in agriculture is a good water supply. And so what are your plans about water conservation in the area?
Well, water it is so important. Oh my goodness, it's so important. That's probably, when I traveled in the rural areas, the most common issue and thing gets brought up is water, because it's not a 1 or 2 year fix. It's in the next 50 years. How do we plan accordingly? And so in this last session, there was $1 billion allocated to the Texas Water Fund. And I know in this next session, there will be more resources allocated to make sure that we have a long-term plan. I know that Senator Perry in Lubbock, he has done a lot of work on this, and he has been planning and prepping for this session to make sure that Texas is set up in the next 50 years. And speaking from someone who's young, I hope to raise my kids and grandkids in this part of Texas, and water is a huge part of that. And I'm going to be here in the next 50 years. And so planning now for the bigger picture is so important. I know it maybe not is the hottest topic to talk about in Texas, but it is so important. Access to good, healthy water. I know there's talks about desalination plants. Those are obviously very, very expensive, but I'm thankful also for Senator Perry that he's spearheading this and making sure that we have a plan for the next 50 years.
And one of the big things I think you think about too in Texas, it's a big state. We're up here in West Texas, and the electric grid. That's something that is huge, especially when it's so cold or when it's really hot. And so what are some plans that you guys have for the electric grid and making sure that that is working long term?
Totally. Well, this is a really important issue, and we've seen, pros and cons to different storms come in, and it's not good. And so I think the biggest focus is making sure that we're investing in reliable, dispatchable energy. Typically, historically, that's been the oil and gas industry, and so I think with legislation, making sure that we're not over-regulating landowners on when it looks like they're investing in reliable energy, but also just making sure that I think the hesitation and concern can sometimes be, is it reliable, is it dispatchable? And I also trust that Governor Abbott and Lieutenant Governor are very highly focused on making sure that we are investing in reliable energy.
Big issue in Texas that we hear all the time is border security. And so what are kind of your thoughts and your plans to help make sure the Texas border is secure?
Well, I am optimistic now that President Trump is going to be taking over in just shy of a weekish. And so I'm really excited about what we'll see in the next 4 years under his administration. I do know securing the border, it is one of the most important issues to Texans. And really the reality is we don't want the drug cartels, we don't want sex traffickers, and we don't want terrorists in our country. And so I've been thankful to watch Governor Abbott the last 4 years under the Biden administration. He has carried the nations on his shoulders when it comes to protecting the citizens of Texas. And so now when we look at what does it look like to actually secure the border, to deport, our sex traffickers and drug cartels back to Mexico, and also work on the immigration process to make sure that, we can allow other people to come into our country, but do it the right way. There are, it's very long to become a legal citizen, and it's very expensive. And so I think on both sides, those are two different policies that I would differentiate between. I think that when we enter into this current administration, new administration, that we will see a lot of changes.
And speaking of looking ahead to the future, are there any committees that you hope to be assigned to?
Well, there are a lot of committees that I'm thinking I can learn a lot. It's amazing. So I will say, one, when you come in as a freshman, typically you're at the bottom of the totem pole, and so your pick, it kind of all depends on all that. But there are several. I would say there's several committees. Appropriations, which would be pretty rare if I got on as a freshman. But you just learn a lot about the budget, and it helps. I think it helps speed up the process of really understanding how does the legislature impact Texas. Health and Human Services, my background in healthcare, I do think that I can have a seat at the table that would be helpful. And then agriculture, I think, is so important to District 87. And I know a lot of the agriculture issues can be federally based, but there are a handful of issues in Texas to make sure that we have good representation.
And you mentioned that you're coming in as the freshman and you're new, but the constituents here, they have said that they trust you, they want you to be the one who represents them. And so I guess, what does that mean for you, knowing that, you are the young person who gets to come in and kind of be the voice for this area?
Well, I am so excited. It's been a year and a half, 2 years in the making, and there's been a lot of preparation coming in as a young person, and I think there's been several things. So first off, one, having good staff. Whenever I've spent a lot of time interviewing staff, making sure I have, the best who have experience in the Capitol, who are well connected relationally, who believe in the same values that District 87 does. And I feel very confident about my staff in Austin. They're ready to go and they're excited to get to work. And then the other part is just relationships. I mean, it really is all about relationships and finding common ground with people, even if they're conservative or they're liberal or Democrat, finding common ground with them. And so I've spent the last 5 months, I made it a goal to meet with as many state rep Republicans as possible. So there's 150 members in the Texas House, 88 Republicans, 62 Democrats. And this summer I spent time going to the Republicans' district, sitting down with them. I've at least spoken to all 88 at some point, and I have learned a lot in that. And so I'm thankful that as I'm walking in as a freshman, I've developed and established relationships prior to being sworn in, which I think will set up District 87 well, and also just learning. I feel like I've tried to get a little bit ahead of the curve as much as possible, but a lot of work, and I'm very excited and humbled that I get this opportunity.
And my last question before we go, we saw the mental health hospital that is becoming a reality for this area, and that was kind of led by Representative Ford Price. Is there one project or an initiative that you kind of want to lead, and whenever your time is over, many years from now, that you want people to remember you by?
That's a great question. I don't have a specific project in mind. I'm really looking forward to this next session, learning and understanding what's practical and what makes sense, because I'm finding when it comes to bills, we have more bills pre-filed right now than we ever have historically, and you just see a lot of bad bills. And my approach has been making sure we are keeping the control local, and also we're cutting government. And so right now, I would love to say I have one project, but what I am focused on is seeing, what legislation is going to be impactful to Texas and District 87, and I'm sure there will be something come along the way, but right now the focus is more on effective legislation and learning and finding a place in the legislature.
If you'd like to see more about our interview with Representative Smithee or Representative Fairley, head over to myhighplains.com. Speaking of lawmakers from our area, Representative Ronnie Jackson being appointed to a subcommittee of the House and Armed Services Committee. Jackson was named chairman of the subcommittee on intelligence and special operations. This group works on policy and programs related to military intelligence, national intelligence, counterterrorism, and special operations forces. We'll wrap things up after this. Keep it here. Thank you for joining us this morning. That's it for us on Politics Today this week. We have more about the upcoming legislative session in our interviews with Representative Smithee and Fairley over on our website. You can go to myhighplains.com right now to stay up on the latest political news with us this week. Plus, check us out on Alexa, Instagram, and like us on Facebook. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.